Hey guys. Welcome to day 2 of the Inner Mean Girl series. It's Ditch Your Inner Mean Girl and Learn to Trust Your Own Voice. This is day 2. So yesterday, if you tuned in yesterday, if you missed it, go find it. Or sign up for my emails and you can get the recaps for it. So yesterday we talked about your inner mean girl. We named her. And that really helps us other that voice, that nagging voice inside our head that like tells us all these things, like we're not good enough, whatever it is. We talked on that yesterday. Make sure that you catch that first video. Hey guys, hey Sandra, Morgan, it's good to see you guys. So I wanted to come on and talk on day 2. So we named our inner mean girl, and then we've recognized some of the ways that she speaks to us and some of the things that she tells us that are false. And a lot of us walk around without like understanding or having this opportunity to remove her from us and understand that she's different than us, that it's not our whole authentic voice that's telling us these things. We're just kind of walking around in a big jumble. I know that I was when I was in active addiction. I didn't understand the difference between what she was saying to me, and like it's almost like I didn't realize that I had a choice to think anything differently. There was really no training, no understanding that I didn't do the work to do the healing to understand the voices that were coming at me. Hello, you guys. Oh, I'm so glad that you're here. So yesterday we named our inner mean girl. We recognized the things that she's saying to us. We kind of recognized where those things come from. A lot of it is trauma based, which like trauma sounds like a scary word for those of us that are in recovery. I'm sure, like recovery from any addiction. For me, I'm active in a 12-step program. So I throw around these buzzwords a lot. So I don't mean to make anybody uncomfortable or to throw labels on anything, but I will be saying things like addiction, trauma. I talk about my suicidal past and my mental health past and things like that. So here are your trigger warnings for anything today, because it is a little heavier. Kelsey, thank you. You know what? I'm fucking proud of you. You are such a light in my life, and you're like leading the way. I'm like, what's Kelsey doing today? So you teach so many, and I'm one of them. So thank you. But so today we're diving a little bit deeper. Yesterday was kind of fun. We kind of messed around with naming our inner mean girl. I mentioned my name is Cynthia. May or may not have been kind of inspired by my algebra teacher in high school. But anyway, that's a whole nother story. And so today, we're talking about, what happens to us. What are the effects, on our life? And some of them can be, they're pretty, life-changing, kind of like life-altering, ways that our inner mean girl, or this voice in our head that tells us these things, it keeps us playing small, and it can affect 4 major areas in our life. And so one of the first 4 ways, the 4 ways are that we're talking today. We've heard of all these different realms of us as human beings, but emotionally, mentally, physically, and spiritually as well. And sometimes these can all get kind of jumbled in one big thing, and we don't really take the time. A lot of us, sometimes, I know before I found any type of recovery or any type of 12-step program or opened a book or tried to learn about myself, before I was willing to look at myself and the damage that I was kind of doing to myself, and allowing that damage in my mind affect my life in all 4 areas completely. It completely overtook me. And before I looked at it, I didn't really understand that I could and should compartmentalize different areas of my life and kind of look and dive deeper into the ways that I can heal my emotional side, my mental, my physical, and my spiritual. So that's what we're doing today. So emotionally, so when I did a poll on my Instagram, asking people about what part of their mindset kind of stops them the most, kind of is the most troubling for them. And a lot of women wrote in, and I mentioned that like 80% of women wrote in, and they said that it was their negative self-talk. And so that's kind of what inspired this whole entire live training, is like a 3-day live training on your inner mean girl. And that negative, we call it self-talk, but the whole point of this training is to understand that that voice telling us these things, it can, it's a lot easier to kind of start to process it and get through it if we don't think that it's our fault and it's like us, it's our issue, and that we created this thing on our own. If we can other it and put a name to it, Cynthia, she doesn't know what she's talking about, like Regina George, right? Like the movie Mean Girls. If we can be like, well, Regina is batshit crazy, that has nothing to do with me, and I got my own things going on. She doesn't even know my life. Like, she doesn't even go here. If we can do that, it's a lot easier to start to kind of dismantle some of the shit that she throws at us and some of the shit that she says. Because it does affect us completely. So back to that poll, that negative self-talk poll, a lot of emotion was wrapped up into those answers, the way that women were saying how it has affected them a lot in their low self-confidence, their low self-worth. When I hear people talk about low self-worth, another one of those scary buzzwords that I've done a lot of like reading and research on is shame. And fun fact, just side note, when I got a DUI and ended up assaulting an officer and got put in jail for a little bit a few years ago, I was nowhere near even thinking that I was going to be ending my addiction anytime soon. And I was teaching at a college at the same time, so I had this really interesting like double life dynamic going on. And my inner mean girl was completely running my life, but I was trying so hard, that perfectionism that I had to be perfect and had to be perceived a certain way. It was so strong that I did not really let it be known to my professors and especially my students and things like that. Like, I had my teacher persona and my instructor and master's, like my grad student persona. And then I had the girl having several drinks, like on the way home in her car from teaching, and then continuing to do drugs into the evening, going home with random people. And like, I was very, very disrupted in my life. And so when that happened and I came back, I got bailed out of jail and I came back to campus, one of my college professors actually handed me Brene Brown's book, her first book called The Gifts of Imperfection. And it was really, really difficult for me. One, because I was so embarrassed and full of this shame spiral. It was terrible. It was not a good point in my life. It just added to like my suicidal tendencies of not wanting to be here. And to receive a book from a professor, instead of like viewing it as like such a gift that she cared so much about me and that she thought of me on this book, and by gifting it to me, she was hoping that I would read it and hoping to heal and get better because she cared about me. Instead of viewing it like that, my inner mean girl was so important, or like so rampant and so like in charge of my mind. I opened up the cover, saw the word shame, and instantly thought, my professor thinks that I should be ashamed of who I am because she thinks that I'm embarrassing, and that she thinks that I'm imperfect and that my imperfections are showing, and I've failed in trying to remain this like perfect student and this perfect ideal. And I'm so embarrassed that I'm outed against my will. And it just was this added spiral. So I did not open up that book it literally took me years to open that book. And now it's one of my favorite ones. This is it. She gifted it to me, and it's still here. I love that professor of mine. She ended up being a lifelong advisor of mine, and yeah, I'm hoping to reach out and connect with her again soon. But anyway, so yeah, that was a side note. But emotions can be so intense, and that low confidence and that low self-worth when our inner mean girl has been running our lives for us, and that internal voice for so long. No wonder why we feel the way that we do. And it can lead us to this almost internal panic. For me, that's kind of how I felt. I described it as like static, because I had so many emotions going on at all times that I was reaching for methods of escape, like hence my addiction. And we'll get kind of further into that too. Another way that your inner mean girl can affect your emotional state is to be resentful of other people that like seem to have their shit together. It's that judgmental side of us. That inner mean girl is like Regina George. If she thinks that anybody has anything that she wants, or like thinks that, they think that they're better than her, she's like, well, and then she tries to tear them down, to try to be on top. And, she thinks that by putting other people down, she is superior. And that's what our inner mean girl does in our minds. It keeps us stuck. And one way that I found is really effective, instead of saying, when we catch that, our inner mean girl, when I catch Cynthia saying things like, I'm pathetic, I'm annoying, I'm fat, whatever it is, like I'm lazy, I am whatever it is, like fill in. I mean, like those are just kind of my like top ones that I've been kind of battling lately, which kind of like all my life, but those are on the top of my head, so they must be here in the forefront for a reason. Those are some things that she says to me lately. And instead of saying like, or like with my mental health too, like, so I'll dive a little bit deeper into that too. But when we say like, I am this, instead of switching that around to I am this, trying to catch her in the act and be like, that's incorrect. That's my inner mean girl talking, and saying more things that start with I have. Something like for a big one for me, like I am depressed. I am anxious, like stuff like that. Instead of saying those things, I'll be like, I have depression, and so it's okay, like it's a symptom to feel the way that I feel. It's not a moral failing because I have these things going on in my life, instead of instead of like I am annoying, that thing. It's like I have a lot of energy, and I'm excited to speak on a lot of things that are important to me. And if we can start to dismantle her I am statements and turn them into I have statements, it kind of diffuses the negativity in it and kind of gives us some self-compassion, which is the key to everything that this whole training is encompassed. Like if you get anything out of day 1, 2, and 3 from this Inner Mean Girl training, it's that self-compassion is literally the root of what we're trying to get to here, to try to understand that we can remove that inner mean girl and that we can focus on ourself and our authentic person, that we are separate, and that we have value. So I mentioned so that's the emotional bracket. So then there's 3 other ones. The next one is mental. And so my diagnoses, and I speak of this on my page a lot, but I talk about mental health a lot. It's so important. And my mental health diagnoses stem from my childhood trauma, growing up in an abusive alcoholic home, having that like fight or flight constant response. And so I live with depression and anxiety paired, and I have complex PTSD. And so when we think about the trauma that we have based on the events that happened in our past, we can start to understand, instead of like, I'm lazy, I'm no good, I don't have worth, who would care, and stuff like this, we can start to understand that our inner mean girl says these things to us. And these are, while yes, it's a medical diagnosis, I can understand that my depression and my anxiety come a lot from me believing that these thoughts that are in my head of who I am, how other people are, how the world is, when I think that those are true because I'm listening to the negativity that my inner mean girl is giving me, that literally is what creates the symptoms of my depression and my anxiety. And then mental health, like pairing into that, is my addiction as well. And so I don't know how many of you that, if you're just joining, we're talking about the effects that your inner mean girl has on your life in the emotional, mental, physical, and spiritual realms of your life. And so talking about mental health, of course my addiction is part of that. And if you are in recovery, if you're trying to live a sober lifestyle, if you're curious about it, if you don't have an issue with alcohol or drugs in any form, that's totally okay. You're welcome to stay. Like, you're totally part of this club, because part of yesterday we talked about how every person, no matter if you're male, female, rich, poor, whatever it is, like, you have an inner mean girl, or if you're a dude, you can call it something else, like an inner mean guy. telling us what's not good enough about us. And that can be because of these traumas and these thoughts and beliefs that we think are true, that our inner mean girl has told us all of our lives. It can turn into an addiction, not necessarily alcohol or drugs always. It can come forth in other ways that we're trying to escape our own reality or escape the panic that inner mean girl can create in us. That for me, it's depression and anxiety. So I'm either feeling very low self-worth and very like unworthy, or I'm feeling super anxious and kind of panicky about like not being good enough or whatever it is, And so when I choose to escape through, whether it's like binge eating or there's so many forms, whether it be shopping. I've done all of these things. I mean, I've talked about credit card debt that I'm trying to pay down because in my active addiction, I leaned on literally and everything that I could escape my mind with. So if it made me feel good, I went with it because I felt so miserable. I was willing to do anything to get me out of my own head. And so then also isolation or codependency is part of that mental bracket as well. So for me, it was kind of a weird mix. I was isolating myself from everybody because I was living in secret and I was not being honest with myself or anybody that cared about me, not really. And when I was using drugs with certain people, I wasn't honest with them about how I was feeling in my day-to-day. It was just like about the party, and I would use that like party excuse to be there for the drugs to escape. And so there was that real isolation part and secrecy of my drinking and like how I was escaping, paired with being codependent and never wanting to be alone. So I wanted to be around other people and have substances constantly because I was dependent on other things, people, places for me to feel okay about myself, because I was not aware that I had the power to feel better about myself in any way, shape, or form. I thought I was like looking for it in any other place besides inside myself. And then, so I guess for those of you that don't know me or know my past or how I used to be a really negative person. I used to catch myself being super negative, and there were times where I would catch myself going like, I don't remember saying anything positive in like the last several conversations. And I was down on myself. I was down on the world. I was down on other people. And again, this was my inner mean girl talking at me. And when we project that negativity outward, it can be beneficial to kind of let other people know how we're really feeling, kind of throw a red flag here or there. But it can also be really contagious to other people. And it can have other people kind of, for me, I lost a lot of friends. My sisters started to pull away from me a lot, and I just didn't know how to get out of it. So for me, it was really important to understand that I can catch that negative thought in my head and then understand it's not my negative thought. Like, it's not even real. It's Cynthia, my inner mean girl. And she's saying these things to me, these negative thoughts of like, I'll never be good enough. Oh, well, I'm never gonna be worthy of love. Well, all my friends leave anyway. What's the point of making new ones? Whatever the situation was, because I've said and thought all of these things, instead of saying them out loud and creating this story for myself, this reality, and understanding that like that's the story that I've decided to lean on and to invest in, and understand if we can take a step back before we even say it out loud to catch it in our minds. That's the strength that we're going for, and to grab it and be like, okay, is this thought real? Like recently I've lost a pretty close girlfriend of mine, and on my end, I thought we were close, and I thought that we bonded and that we understood each other. And when it kind of came to the forefront that she did not feel the same, and that she was very upset at me for something that I had said and the way that I had said it, I didn't even understand that we were arguing. And so her exit out of our friendship had me really hurt and really confused. And that it was like a sudden shame spiral of like, what did I do? Like, oh my gosh, all these things. And one of my first thoughts was, this is why I don't create friendships with women because they're dramatic and they let their emotions fly off, and and all these things. And that was Cynthia, though, because Cynthia, our inner mean girl, wants us to stay small. She wants us to isolate. She wants us to have no friends. She wants us all to herself, and she wants to control the shit out of us. And so when I caught myself thinking these things, and I talked about this at a 12-step meeting, but I caught myself thinking that this is why I'm not friends with women. And then I was like, and this is something that you should practice too. It's one of the best things that we can do when we catch ourselves with those thoughts, to be like, is this true? And to look around and understand all the strong, massive, beautiful support systems that I have that are all women in recovery or in my day-to-day life, in my fitness coaching that I do, whether it's my family, my sisters are amazing. I have so many women in my life that support the fuck out of me, and I support them back. And so to understand that that isn't true, just because there is one person that I'm clashing with right now, and that we're not seeing eye to eye, and her reaction had me in my feels, I was not prepared. It really caught me off guard. But that does not give Cynthia the right to tell me that I need to cut off all my other female friendships because women are dramatic. It's not true. And that othering of women and thinking that they're dramatic is such a patriarchal statement that I have in my mind as trauma from living in a misogynistic home, and in the society that we live in, where we're like, well, you're not like other girls, you're all these other things. And it's I want to be like most girls, and I am like most girls. We're like each other, and it's not a competition. Nobody signed up for that competition at all. So yeah, Cynthia wants us to believe that all of those things are true, and it's just not. And our own voice would never believe these things. Our own voice would never believe these things, and she would never say these things to us. It's always Cynthia. It's always our inner mean girl that's trying to bring us down and try and feed us this crap that it keeps us down. It keeps us sick. Speaking of being sick, the third realm, so we talked about the emotional and the mental realms of how you're affected in your day-to-day life when your inner mean girl runs the show. And physically, a lot of people have written me about this too, because I share my body transformation when I got into recovery, and how I was so unhealthy in all of these areas of my life, in all of these realms. I was so unhealthy emotionally, mentally. Being suicidal is the lowest of low when it comes to mental health and emotional health. I was that. And physically, I had some of the highest blood pressure. I was super overweight. I was a weight that I should have never been if I wasn't, looking to numb out or look for food and other things. I was sleeping much, much more. I would sleep for 5 hours during the afternoon when I was supposed to be, just healthy people don't necessarily lean on 5-hour long naps, and then when they wake up, they don't wake up with alcohol and drugs and then numb out with food and other substances. They look into it as something that is, your body is something to take care of. And the inner mean girl in me was completely running the show, and it totally showed in the unhealthy ways that, it was not good. A lot of it, and I don't even want to mention weight being a thing, but now that I'm in recovery, and to understand when I'm eating rationally, or not small rations. Literally I'm eating with health in mind. You know what I mean? I'm not overeating on purpose because now I've substituted the alcohol or drugs with massive amounts of food in order to not spend time with myself and look into my emotions. When we look to heal, it can completely change our lives. And so that inner mean girl, she doesn't run the show anymore. And when I, see imperfections on my body and the way that we are taught, society teaches us and our culture teaches us, and, the beauty culture, the beauty standards that we have as women that we have to uphold, and men too. When I look at my body now, instead of saying I am whatever, I am fat, I can say I have fat and it's my body's way of protecting me, or whatever it is. It's like, that can be, that's another word that's like we can't talk about it, and it's like, it's like Juno. She's like, like when we're talking about like fingernails, they were talking about like, I read this quote the other day. It was like, you aren't fat, you have fat, which is like a normal bodily function. Also, you have fingernails, but you're not fingernails. And it was just a really, really funny way. Like, I thought of Juno right away, and she's like, my baby has fingernails. And it made me really think like, yes, we're not that I am, we are that I have. And it is such a better way to like other our mean girl away from what we truly are and where our worth really lies, instead of like zoning in on whatever it is about our physicality that is hard, and it wasn't just the body image and the way that I looked to the outside world that was causing me all of this inner turmoil, literally my addiction and my unhealthy gut, the way that it was. A fun fact, alcohol is like a massive contributor to anxiety. And people are like, oh, well, I drink to chill out. And I'm like, sister, that is not how that works. Like, you are adding so much more anxiety to by drinking in order to calm down, because once it starts to come out of your system, your body's instant reaction is to freak the fuck out. It is a toxin. And so once I'm learning all of that and kind of understanding physically, and when I'm letting my inner mean girl run the show, I lean on all of these things. I lean on substances, like alcohol, drugs, food, all of this stuff. And it can really contribute to real detrimental, life-threatening illnesses, aside from just addiction. But like I mentioned, like high blood pressure, heart disease, all of these things. And so literally by believing our inner mean girl, it can be manifested in our actual bodily health. And then the last one that we'll talk about today, so we talked about emotional, mental, and physical realms and how those are affected by our inner mean girl's voice taking control of us. And the last one is spiritual. And this one is always like, I can feel myself like getting anxious because I'm still figuring out how to talk about it unless I'm talking with my sponsor. Hello. I see you pop on, and I'll keep it anonymous, and I love you. And when I'm speaking with her, I'm so open about my spirituality, and I can talk about it like this, just like this. It just makes sense to me, But before I looked into recovery and looked into possibly maybe that it was very factual right in front of me, that leaning on substances or outside sources, really any outside source. I mean, like I was leaning on men, I was leaning on food, I was leaning on shopping, I was leaning on sleep, I was leaning on literally everything else outside of myself. And once I understood that I was literally spiritually bankrupt and got over my resentment towards the religion that I had been brought up in, and kind of sat with myself to think, what if this is true? What if there's an inner mean girl in my mind that's been running my life? And what if inherently to my core, I'm not a terrible fucking person? Like, what if there is a good spirit in me that has just been wanting help? Like, what if I've just been desperately reaching and grasping and trying to dig myself out of this hole for years and literally had no idea where to turn? What if I was just in the dark and I didn't even understand that there was an exit because it was so dark in there? And I didn't even understand that if I were to start walking, what's the point? Because I didn't understand that there was an entrance to find. I thought that the darkness was my life and that it was my reality. And so once I kind of leaned into this idea that this inner mean girl wasn't my voice and that my voice was different and that I had a different purpose, it really made me just so aware of my authentic wholeness. It completely changed my life. If we can remove, just practice, even just take the time to try to sit with ourselves and to try to think, what if this is true? What if there is something in me that is totally good and that I'm here for a purpose, and that all of these things that I tell myself on the day-to-day to keep myself from living a better, healthier, happier life, what if they're false? And what can I do to start leaning into that? And so tomorrow we're really, instead of talking about all of these things, I know that this was kind of, it wasn't the fluffy, fun stuff that it was, that we were talking about yesterday. This is hard. It's really difficult. And recovery is the hardest fucking thing I've ever done in my whole life. Like, I cannot picture in the future anything more difficult than the painful, uncomfortable, long process of what it felt like to even begin recovery. And it's still hard. It's still really hard. It's getting so much easier. It's almost getting fun in a way. Sometimes it's like, fuck this. But sometimes it's like my curiosity of like the what ifs. What if the way that I'm thinking isn't absolute truth, and sometimes that's worth it. And so that's what I'm here to do so tomorrow, instead of, diving into, today we dove into those 4 realms, the emotional, mental, physical, spiritual ways that you're affected when you do let your inner mean girl run the show. But tomorrow is all about what happens when you listen to your own voice. How do you learn to trust your own voice, and what does that look like? So that's what we're here to do tomorrow. If you signed up for my emails, then you know that there is an opportunity to win a 30-minute free coaching session with me after all this is said and done. And by doing that, you have to do your homework. And they're super easy, super fun. And I've been getting emails and DMs with people's homework assignments, and it's been amazing. So if you haven't done day 1's homework, do it. If you haven't signed up for the emails, sign up. The link is still in my bio. You can sign up whenever you're ready, and I'll send you the day 1 and the day 2 and the day 3, which happens tomorrow, the replays. So you'll be able to watch these videos on repeat, and you'll be able to have access to that homework. And if you DM me, I think Friday, I would be doing the drawing to see who wins that 30-minute free coaching session with me over Zoom. So we can kind of dive deeper on what you learned from this training and what we can do to kick off that healing process and to start to trust your own voice. So that is all that I have for you today, and I will see you tomorrow for day 3. Thank you for joining me.